What's up everybody and welcome back. This is John from firstrebrief.co.uk and today we are looking at ankle instability. So if you're someone that suffers with ankle problems, this is a very interesting paper to break down. We are looking at this paper that came out in 2023 called The Association of Diaphragm Contractility, I struggle to say that word for some reason, and postural control in a chronic ankle instability population. And this is a preliminary study. A preliminary study is a small study, almost like a pilot study. So this has not gone a huge populace, so that should be taken. These results should be taken with a pinch of salt because it is testing a small population, and this might not correlate to bigger size audiences. But it is a very interesting paper because it looks at some very interesting aspects of the diaphragmatic movement in relation to postural control, which, as we know from things like shoulder pain, the diaphragm is often overlooked in relation to shoulder pain. So we're looking at that same argument, just descending down into the ankle rather than up into the shoulder. So like I say, very interesting. I find this paper very interesting anyway. So what they are looking at here, they looked at 15 different participants, all came in, they all have chronic instability in their ankle already, and they looked at the quality and thickness of the right and left hemispheres of the diaphragm. So as you know or may not know, that mainly a lot of things in the human body are asymmetrical, and actually the right hand side of your diaphragm is slightly bigger and thicker than the left hand side. So they were basically just testing to what degree of thickness and what ratio that is, where that optimal ratio be in relation to postural control and the pain and instability in the ankle. So interesting study in that regard. There's obviously things you can do to train the diaphragm and stuff like that, so that's why it's interesting when you look at postural control. Some of the things they're testing here are things like the center of pressure of velocity, which is called COPV. Now this is an interesting parameter because this is looking at how you control your center of mass at point of pressure, i.e. towards the ground. So they did this, stood on one leg and did a balancing task on one particular limb for 20 seconds with their eyes opened, and they did this 3 times to see what the effect the diaphragm was having on stability. So the velocity in this is the foot on the ground and how that is controlling the center of mass, which is around your waist, your belly button, in relation to where that foot is on the ground. So if you have a good center of pressure velocity, then you've got good balance and good movement in terms of how you move your center of mass. So this is important for anything where it requires you to run, walk, flex the foot in some way. So pretty much all sports. This is also looking at things like time to boundary, TTB, which again is in relation to how long you can keep that ankle stable for, and the stability of the ankle movement. And they looked at it in 2 movements. They looked at an anterior posterior movement and a medial lateral directions. So anterior posterior is moving the ankle backwards and forwards, and then the medial lateral is moving it from side to side. So these are just all the parameters they were looking at and they were testing for. So what did they find? Is there anything interesting here in this paper for us to have a look at? Turns out there is. Just like when we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about shoulder pain and how the diaphragm is often overlooked for shoulder pain, it turns out that when we descend down into the ankle, we see similar results. That when you look at the right hemisphere, the larger portion of your diaphragm that's doing a lot of the work because it's got less organs in its way, that thickness, that measurement of that thickness and how you can contract that muscle actually does have some implication when it comes to ankle stability and the movement of the ankle. So what they saw here was that the central point of velocity, the time to boundary, all of these parameters in terms of stability and improving stability were in the anterior posterior position. Now this is interesting as well because I should go on to say as well that the left hemisphere also showed a moderate amount of correlarity between this hemisphere being of right thickness compared to stability of the ankle. They didn't see this in the medial lateral direction. So you might be thinking, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to me? Well, it's interesting that the movement of your ankle backwards and forwards and that posterior control of the diaphragm, it does have a relation. So if you have a better diaphragmatic movement, you have better contraction of the diaphragm, you can have better stability, better postural control overall. So this is very interesting for a few different reasons, because obviously most sports, like I said before, is going to require you to move that ankle backwards and forwards. If you're having to lean in any way and put pressure into that joint, you're also going to have better control over your movement if you have better diaphragmatic control. Now, you don't see this in the medial lateral movement of the ankle in comparison to how the diaphragm is, and why that might be, it's not really said right here, but we can make some assumptions at this point that the medial lateral, the stability left and right of your ankle, is being influenced more by things like the ligaments, the muscles, attachment to the small bones in the ankle joint, rather than the movement of the ankle itself. And quite often this is going to be a directional thing, rather than, so you're going to be looking at things like stability of knee joints and things like that for that movement to be improved. But this is looking anterior posterior, so it's interesting. So if you do anything that requires you to run, walk, move, and flex that ankle joint backwards and forwards, and you have pain in that, and you have that as a chronic injury point, then it might be some of your breathing apparatus, your diaphragm, that is causing that problem. Now, like I said before, the problems with stuff like studies like this, that are preliminary studies, they're done on a small amount of people. It's hard to see if this extends out into the main populace. Obviously, they did this test as well on chronic people that already have chronic instability in their ankle, but they saw improvements in their ankle stability if their diaphragm was contracting properly. So we can make some assumptions from this, that if you have if you don't have chronic problems, but you are someone that does have issues with getting injuries to this particular area, then this might be down to posterior control, and this might be because of the diaphragm. So we can extrapolate some things out of this that can then be fed back into training in terms of strength and conditioning around your chosen sport. So a very interesting study, something I find quite fascinating when we look at breathing and how it affects multi-facets of our sports performance and how we perform in our day-to-day lives, that it actually influences quite a lot of different things. Very, very interesting for me, and I hope for you guys as well. Comment below if you're someone that does suffer with ankle injuries, and if anyone's ever spoken to you about the diaphragm or how you're breathing in relation to your posterior control, because I'd be super interested to hear about that. And yeah, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it informative. Make sure to give a like, comment, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. All of this stuff helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here, breaking down these studies, breaking down techniques and stuff to improve not only the biomechanics, but obviously we'll get into stuff like biochemistry stuff for breathing as well very, very soon. And so if you subscribe, you will get that video, will come up on your notification bar, and you can enjoy at your leisure. So hope to see you all soon.